Winston Churchill, the refusal to surrender, at 1100 hours on May 28, 1940. Winston Leonard Spencer. Churchill enters the cabinet room at 10 Downing Street. He is 65 years old. Prime Minister for 18 days. Outside, the British Expeditionary Force retreats toward Dunkirk. Over 300,000 men are trapped against the sea. Belgium surrendered this morning. France will fall within weeks. Germany controls continental Europe from Norway to the Mediterranean. Foreign Secretary Lord Halifax, Edward Frederick Lindley Wood, 1st Earl of Halifax, sits at the cabinet table. He has spent 2 days arguing that Britain should seek terms. Italy might broker negotiations. Perhaps Benito Mussolini could arrange settlement. Hitler might accept British independence if Britain abandons continental interests. The Royal Navy could be preserved. The Empire might survive. This morning, Halifax threatened to resign. Churchill understands what resignation means. Halifax commands Conservative Party loyalty that Churchill lacks. Halifax represents respectability, tradition, the established order. Churchill represents risk, unpredictability, decades of political misjudgment. If Halifax resigns, the government might fall, Churchill might be replaced. A new government might negotiate. Britain might accept terms. The war might end before truly beginning. Around the table sit the War Cabinet. Neville Chamberlain, Lord President of the Council, Prime Minister until 18 days ago. Clement Attlee, Lord Privy Seal. Labour Party leader, Arthur Greenwood, Minister without portfolio, another Labour member. 3 days of crisis meetings have brought them to this moment. Will Britain negotiate or fight? Churchill faces them. He has called an unusual meeting. 25 ministers, not just the War Cabinet. They crowd into the room, sensing crisis. Churchill speaks without notes. His voice, distinctive and resonant even in private conversation, fills the space. He reminds them of the military situation. The facts are terrible. The BEF is cut off. Most equipment will be lost. France is collapsing. Invasion is possible. But, Churchill argues, Britain possesses advantages Germany cannot overcome. The Royal Navy controls the seas. The Royal Air Force, intact, can contest air superiority. The English Channel provides defensive barrier. Most critically, time favors Britain. America, though neutral, leans toward support. Eventually, circumstances might bring American intervention. Then Churchill addresses the fundamental question: should Britain explore terms through Italian mediation? His answer is absolute: no. Any approach to Hitler, even indirect, signals weakness. Hitler will demand terms Britain cannot accept: surrender of the fleet, occupation of bases, control of foreign policy. These terms would reduce Britain to German satellite. Better to fight, accept destruction if necessary, than submit to domination. He concludes with words that Leo Amery, Secretary of State for India, later records: we shall never surrender. If this Long Island story of ours is to end at last, let it end only when each one of us lies choking in his own blood upon the ground. The room erupts. Ministers stand. Applaud. Clap Churchill on the shoulders. Several weep openly. Chamberlain, who has wavered for days, declares his support. Halifax, isolated, acknowledges defeat. The cabinet returns to session. Halifax's proposal for Italian mediation is rejected. Britain will fight on. This moment, occurring in private, witnessed only by ministers, determines World War II's outcome more decisively than any battle. If Britain negotiates in May 1940, the war ends with German hegemony over Europe. No second front develops. No strategic bombing campaign weakens German industry. No Allied invasion of Normandy occurs. The Soviet Union faces Germany alone. The outcome of that struggle remains uncertain at best. But Britain does not negotiate. Churchill, through force of personality and rhetorical power, convinces enough ministers that negotiation equals defeat, that fighting offers hope even if hope seems irrational. This achievement, accomplished without firing a shot, represents Churchill's greatest contribution to Allied victory. Understanding how Churchill reached this moment requires understanding his entire life. He was born November 30th, 1874, at Blenheim Palace, ancestral home of the Dukes of Marlborough. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, served as Chancellor of the Exchequer. His mother, Jenny Jerome, was American, daughter of wealthy New York financier. Churchill grew up in privilege but not affection. His parents largely ignored him. He was raised by nannies, sent to boarding schools, educated in institutions that emphasized classical learning and military training. He attended Harrow School from 1888 to 1893. His academic performance was mediocre. He struggled with languages, mathematics, classics, but he excelled in English composition and history. Teachers noted his exceptional memory, his facility with words, his determination despite setbacks. These qualities, developed in adolescence, would define his political career. He entered Royal Military College, Sandhurst. In 1893, military life suited him better than academic study. He graduated 20th of 130 cadets, December 1894, receiving commission as cornet in the 4th Queen's Own Hussars. His military service, though brief, shaped his understanding of warfare and command. He served in Cuba as observer, then India with his regiment, then Sudan with the 21st Lancers, participating in the last great cavalry charge at Omdurman, September 2nd, 1890. Throughout military service, Churchill wrote. He sent dispatches to newspapers. He wrote books. The Story of the Malakand Field Force, published 1898. The River War in 1899. These works, written before age 25, demonstrated literary skill and historical insight that established his reputation as writer as well as soldier. Writing provided income that his family could not. It also provided platform for political ambitions. He left the army in 1899, standing for Parliament as Conservative candidate for Oldham. He lost narrowly. He immediately left for South Africa to cover the Boer War as correspondent. He was captured by Boers, imprisoned in Pretoria, escaped, reached Portuguese East Africa after traveling 300 miles through hostile territory. The escape made him famous. He returned to Britain in 1900, stood again for Parliament, won the Oldham seat. At age 25, Churchill entered Parliament. His political career, spanning the next 64 years, would be marked by brilliance, misjudgment, controversy, and ultimate vindication. He served as President of the Board of Trade, Home Secretary, First Lord of the Admiralty, Minister of Munitions, Secretary of State for War, Secretary of State for Air, Chancellor of the Exchequer. He also spent years in political wilderness, out of office, mistrusted by both parties, considered unreliable and reckless. The Gallipoli campaign of 1915 nearly ended his career permanently. As First Lord of the Admiralty, Churchill advocated forcing the Dardanelles, knocking Turkey out of the war, opening supply route to Russia. The campaign, poorly executed, cost 57,000 Allied casualties and achieved nothing. Churchill bore responsibility. He resigned, served briefly on the Western Front as battalion commander, returned to government in diminished roles. For decades afterward, critics cited Gallipoli as evidence of Churchill's dangerous judgment. Through the 1920s and 30s, Churchill remained a marginal figure. He opposed Indian independence, alienating liberals. He supported Edward VIII during abdication crisis, alienating conservatives. Most significantly, he opposed appeasement of Nazi Germany, advocating rearmament and confrontation while most politicians pursued negotiation. From 1933 onward, Churchill warned about German rearmament. He was ignored, dismissed as warmonger, excluded from government. September 3, 1939. Britain declares war on Germany following invasion of Poland. Neville Chamberlain, whose appeasement policy has failed completely, recalls Churchill to government as First Lord of the Admiralty. Churchill, 64 years old, returns to office after 10 years wilderness. The signal goes out to the Royal Navy. Winston is back. His performance as First Lord is mixed. He proposes aggressive operations, some successful, others disastrous. The Norwegian campaign of April-May 1940, which he champions, fails catastrophically. British forces evacuate under fire. The debacle leads to parliamentary crisis. The Commons holds confidence debate May 7th-8th. The government survives but with reduced majority. Chamberlain recognizes he cannot continue. Labour refuses to serve under him. Two candidates emerge for Prime Minister. Lord Halifax, Foreign Secretary, favored by King George VI and most conservatives. Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty, favored by Labour and the press. On May 9th, Chamberlain summons both to Downing Street. He asks who should succeed him. Halifax speaks first. He explains that as peer, member of House of Lords rather than Commons, he cannot effectively lead wartime government. The excuse is plausible but untrue. The real reason, Halifax does not want responsibility for what he believes will be Britain's defeat. Churchill says nothing. The silence extends. Chamberlain accepts Halifax's withdrawal. Churchill becomes Prime Minister May 10th, 1940. That same day, Germany invades France, Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg. Churchill's first day in office coincides with Blitzkrieg's beginning. He forms coalition government. Chamberlain becomes Lord President of the Council. Halifax remains Foreign Secretary. Labour leaders Attlee and Greenwood join the War Cabinet. Churchill delivers his first speech as Prime Minister to Commons May 13th. The words become famous. I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. But the famous speech barely hints at the crisis approaching. Through mid-May, German forces advance with shocking speed. French and British armies collapse. By May 20th, German tanks reach the Channel coast, cutting British forces off from the south. The BEF retreats toward Dunkirk. Belgium prepares to surrender. France begins discussing armistice. Halifax sees only military reality. Germany has won. Continuing the war means pointless destruction. Better to negotiate while Britain retains bargaining position. On May 25th, Halifax meets Italian Ambassador Giuseppe Bastianini. Halifax suggests that if Italy could arrange mediation with Germany, Britain might discuss European settlement. This conversation, unauthorized by War Cabinet, represents Halifax's unilateral diplomatic initiative. May 26th, War Cabinet meets at Rouen 900 hours. Halifax reports his conversation with the Italian ambassador. He proposes formal approach to Mussolini, requesting Italian mediation to ascertain German terms. Churchill opposes. He argues any approach signals weakness. Hitler will demand unacceptable terms, but Churchill does not flatly refuse. He wants cabinet consensus. Forcing a split risks government collapse. The debate continues through May 26th, 27th, 28th. 9 war cabinet meetings in 3 days. The discussions, recorded in cabinet minutes, reveal extraordinary tension. Halifax argues Britain must explore all options before committing to fight alone. Churchill counters that exploring options with Hitler means accepting defeat. Chamberlain wavers. Attlee and Greenwood support Churchill, but quietly, avoiding direct confrontation with Halifax. May 27th, 1600 hours. The 4th War Cabinet meeting of the day. Halifax grows increasingly frustrated. The minutes record his statement. He did not disagree with Churchill's views, but attached perhaps more importance than the Prime Minister to the desirability of allowing France to try out the possibilities of European equilibrium. This diplomatic language masks fundamental disagreement. Halifax wants negotiations. Churchill refuses. After the meeting, Halifax confronts Churchill in the garden of 10 Downing Street. The conversation, not recorded officially, is described later by both men. Halifax threatens resignation. Churchill pleads with him to reconsider. The government, Churchill argues, cannot survive Halifax's departure. The Conservatives control Parliament. Most Conservative MPs trust Halifax more than Churchill. If Halifax resigns, he might take enough support to force Churchill out. Negotiation would follow. But Churchill also understands that Halifax, despite Conservative support, lacks Churchill's critical advantage: public support. The British people, though aware Germany is winning, still oppose negotiation. Public opinion, strengthened by years of Churchill's anti-appeasement warnings, favors fighting on. Halifax, representing establishment conservatism, cannot override this public sentiment. May 28th, 11:30 hours. The morning War Cabinet meeting. Halifax renews his proposal for Italian mediation. Churchill responds with the argument that becomes decisive. Any approach to Hitler, even indirectly through Italy, would stem from a position of weakness and inevitably lead to terms that compromised British sovereignty and imperial integrity, rendering such talks tantamount to surrender. He emphasizes Hitler's proven unreliability, citing Munich Agreement violations. He reminds Cabinet that nations accepting humiliating peace never recover, while nations fighting to the end can rise again. Chamberlain speaks. His support proves crucial. Chamberlain's decision to support Churchill was a very important moment in the war. The former Prime Minister, who advocated appeasement for years, now endorses fighting on. His Conservative Party credentials give Churchill the political cover needed to face down Halifax. Churchill adjourns the meeting. He calls the extraordinary session of 25 ministers. His speech to them, described earlier, breaks the crisis. Halifax, isolated, accepts defeat. By 28th of May, it seemed as if Halifax had the upper hand and Churchill might be forced from office. Instead, Churchill prevails. Britain will not negotiate. The decision is not universally popular. Some members were moved to tears, but by no means all of them. Labour MP Emmanuel Shinwell recalled, "We were very much depressed as a result of the events that led to him making this speech, and all his oratory could not remove that depression. Many MPs believe Britain faces certain defeat. Churchill's defiance seems irrational, but it is the irrationality that matters. Rational calculation suggests negotiation. Churchill rejects rational calculation in favor of principles he considers more important than survival." June 4, 1940, 1540 hours. Churchill addresses Commons regarding Dunkirk evacuation. Over 338,000 men were rescued, far exceeding expectations of 20,000 to 30,000. But Churchill refuses to call it victory. Equipment was lost. The BEF is fighting forces destroyed. France is collapsing. Invasion threatens. Then, Churchill delivers the peroration that defines his leadership. The words, composed carefully, revised multiple times, combine factual assessment with emotional appeal. Churchill had to describe a great military disaster and warn of a possible invasion attempt by Nazi Germany without casting doubt on eventual victory. He succeeds through language that balances realism with determination. "We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." The speech continues with words less often quoted but equally significant. "Even if, which I do not for a moment believe, this island or a large part of it were subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British fleet, would carry on the struggle until, in God's good time, the New World, with all its power and might, steps forth to the rescue and the liberation of the old." This passage addresses two audiences. British listeners hear promise of eternal resistance. American listeners, particularly President Franklin Roosevelt, hear promise that if Britain falls, the Royal Navy will not surrender to Germany but will continue fighting from Canada and other empire territories. Roosevelt made clear via secret channels that he wanted a commitment from Britain that even if she were defeated, she would not surrender her fleet, but would send it to South Africa, Australia, Canada, and other parts of the empire. Churchill provides that assurance. The speech's impact is complex. Churchill did not repeat it over the airwaves that evening. Instead, radio journalists simply reported his words on the air. The House of Commons in 1940 lacked recording equipment. Any radio broadcast required Churchill to repeat the speech in a studio. He declined. Too busy with military crisis? The BBC broadcast excerpts read by newsreaders. Years later, a myth developed that Churchill never gave the speech, that an impersonator delivered it. The actor Norman Shelley claimed in 1972 that he had recorded the fight on the beaches speech as Churchill for the radio. This is false. Churchill gave the speech to Commons. The recording everyone knows dates from 1949. When Decca Records convinced Churchill to record his wartime speeches for commercial release. But the immediate impact in June 1940 is real. The speech circulates in printed form. People read it in newspapers. They discuss it in pubs, factories, homes. The words, "We shall fight on the beaches," become shorthand for British determination. The speech does not prevent invasion fears. It does not erase military disaster, but it establishes psychological framework. Britain will resist, regardless of odds, regardless of cost. June 18, 1940. France signs armistice with Germany. Britain stands alone. Churchill addresses Commons again. This speech, titled "Their Finest Hour" by later historians, frames the coming struggle. The Battle of France is over. I expect that the Battle of Britain is about to begin. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves that, if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, "This was their finest hour." The phrase "finest hour" captures Churchill's rhetorical method. He elevates present suffering into historical significance. The British people, facing invasion and possible destruction, are not merely fighting for survival. They are creating legacy that will endure centuries. This framing, simultaneously grandiose and genuine, provides meaning to sacrifice. Through summer and autumn 1940, Churchill's speeches continue. During the Battle of Britain, when RAF Fighter Command contests Luftwaffe control of British skies, Churchill provides narrative. August 20th. Praising RAF pilots. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. The phrase "the few" enters permanent lexicon, defining RAF Fighter Command's role. October 1940. Neville Chamberlain dies of cancer. Churchill delivers eulogy that demonstrates his capacity for generosity toward political opponents. He praises Chamberlain's integrity, his commitment to peace, his courage during terminal illness. He does not mention appeasement's failure. This restraint, unusual in a politician who built career opposing Chamberlain's policies, wins respect across party lines. December 1940. Halifax finally leaves government. Churchill appoints him ambassador to the United States, effectively exiling him. Anthony Eden becomes foreign secretary, the man who threatened resignation in May, who advocated negotiation when negotiation meant surrender. Spends the war in Washington representing the government he opposed. Halifax was sent to Washington as ambassador to the United States. The appointment removes potential rival while utilizing Halifax's diplomatic skills. Through 1941, Churchill works tirelessly to bring America into the war. He corresponds with Roosevelt. He makes radio broadcasts heard in America. He visits Washington August 1941, meeting Roosevelt aboard warships off Newfoundland. The Atlantic Conference produces the Atlantic Charter, statement of war, aims that commits America morally if not yet militarily. December 7th, 1941. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. December 8th. America declares war on Japan. December 11th. Germany declares war on America. Churchill's strategy succeeds. Britain is no longer alone. The vast American industrial capacity will be mobilized. Victory, though distant, becomes probable rather than merely possible. Churchill's wartime leadership combines strategic vision with operational interference. His strategic decisions are generally sound, maintaining Mediterranean presence, supporting Soviet Union, despite ideological opposition to communism, prioritizing bomber offensive to demonstrate Britain is fighting, pursuing peripheral strategy, attacking Axis where they are weak, before attempting direct invasion of France. His operational interference is often problematic. He proposes operations his military commanders consider unwise. He insists on defending Singapore long after it becomes indefensible. He advocates invasions of Norway, Italy, the Dodecanese Islands. Some succeed, many fail. His relationship with military chiefs is contentious. Field Marshal Alan Brooke, Chief of Imperial General Staff, records in his diary constant battles to restrain Churchill's impractical schemes. But Churchill's primary wartime role is not military planning. It is maintaining morale. His speeches, delivered in Commons and broadcast globally, provide narrative structure for the war. He frames defeats as temporary setbacks. He celebrates victories as vindication of British determination. He creates language that gives meaning to suffering. Their finest hour, the few, blood, toil, tears, and sweat, never surrender. This psychological contribution cannot be quantified, but should not be underestimated. Modern wars are industrial conflicts. Victory requires maintaining production, sustaining military forces, preserving civilian morale under bombing and rationing. Churchill's speeches accomplish the latter. British civilians endure years of hardship, partly because Churchill convinces them their sacrifice matters historically. Critics note his limitations. He opposes Indian independence throughout the war, alienating Attlee and other labor ministers. He makes racist statements about Asians and Africans that embarrass even by 1940s standards. His drinking, though exaggerated in popular accounts, is substantial. His health is questionable. He suffers heart attack during 1941, Washington visit that is concealed from public. His judgment regarding Mediterranean strategy is questioned by American commanders who prefer direct approach through France. But these limitations do not diminish his essential achievement. In May 1940, when negotiated peace seemed rational response to military disaster, Churchill chose defiance. In June 1940, when invasion seemed imminent, he chose inspirational rhetoric over realistic assessment. In August 1940, when bombing began, he visited damaged areas, providing visible leadership. Throughout 1940 through 1945, he maintained that Britain's cause was just. Victory was possible. Sacrifice was meaningful. Whether Britain would have survived without Churchill is debated. Some historians argue Halifax would have negotiated terms preserving British independence, if not empire. Others argue any negotiation in 1940 would have led to German domination eventually. The question is unanswerable because Churchill prevented negotiation entirely. What is certain Churchill's refusal to negotiate in May 1940 determined the war's course. If Britain seeks terms, Germany controls Europe. American intervention becomes unlikely. Soviet Union faces Germany alone. The Holocaust proceeds without opposition. The war's outcome, at minimum, is drastically different. V-Day, May 8, 1940. Churchill addresses crowds from Whitehall balcony. He declares, "This is your victory." The crowd responds, "No, it is yours." This exchange, recorded by newsreels, captures Churchill's relationship with British people. His leadership transformed their determination into historical achievement. Their sacrifice vindicated his refusal to surrender. July 1945. General election results announced. Labour wins landslide victory. Churchill, who led Britain through war, is rejected by voters seeking social reform. He accepts defeat gracefully. He transitions to leader of opposition, delivers speech warning about Soviet expansion. An Iron Curtain has descended across the continent. The phrase Iron Curtain defines Cold War era as effectively as finest hour defined 1940. He returns to prime ministry 1951-1955. A second term marked by declining health and diminished energy. He resigns April 1955, age 80. He remains MP until 1964. He dies January 24, 1965, age 90. His state funeral, attended by representatives from 112 nations, is the largest such ceremony since Wellington's death in 1852. Today, Churchill is remembered primarily for 1940, the May cabinet crisis, the fight on the beaches speech, the refusal to negotiate when negotiations seemed rational. These moments define his legacy because they determined history's course. Everything that followed, Allied victory, liberation of Europe, defeat of Nazi Germany, traces back to Churchill's decision in May 1940 that Britain would fight on regardless of odds. The decision was not obviously correct at the time. Many intelligent, patriotic Britons believed negotiation made sense. Halifax was neither coward nor appeaser in traditional sense. He simply recognized military reality and sought to preserve what could be preserved. Churchill rejected this logic. He insisted that some things mattered more than survival, that British independence and honor outweighed rational calculation of odds. This insistence, maintained through extraordinary rhetorical power and political skill, transformed British determination into historical force. The words Churchill spoke in May and June 1940 did not win battles. They did not produce weapons. They did not train soldiers. But they created psychological framework within which British people accepted years of hardship, sustained bombing, continued fighting when fighting seemed futile. That is Churchill's achievement. Not military genius, not political brilliance, not strategic insight, but the ability, at the moment when it mattered most, to convince enough people that surrender was unthinkable, that resistance was necessary, that victory was possible if not probable. The ability to transform military disaster into moral triumph. The ability to make "we shall never surrender" into statement of national policy rather than empty rhetoric. Whether this makes him great man is debatable. His imperialism was retrograde. His racial attitudes were offensive. His judgment was often flawed. His operational interference cost lives. But in May 1940, at age 65, having spent decades in political wilderness, having been proven right about Hitler when everyone else was wrong, he faced choice between rational negotiation and irrational defiance. He chose defiance. Britain followed. The world changed. That moment, more than all his eloquent speeches and memorable phrases, defines Winston Churchill's place in history. He refused to surrender when surrender seemed inevitable. That refusal, maintained through force of will and power of words, proved more decisive than any battle of the war.